Welcome to your deep dive on all things Tesla. As of January 8th, 2025, we're going to try to get you up to speed on what's going on with this company that honestly never seems to stay out of the headlines.
Seems like every day there's something new with them, right?
Yeah, we've got a mix of news articles and even a peek into a Tesla patent for this one.
Oh, cool.
So, is Tesla an unstoppable force in the auto industry, or are there cracks starting to show?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I think the answer might actually surprise you. I mean, on the one hand, you've got the Model Y becoming a sales monster in the UK.
Really?
Fifth best-selling car overall, nabbed a 4.6% market share in 2024.
Wow.
And get this, it's not even fully electric yet.
Yeah, that's pretty mind-blowing when you consider how dominant petrol-powered cars still are.
Right.
But then you turn around and you see not one, but TWO investigations by the NHTSA aimed squarely at Tesla.
Definitely seems like there's a push and pull happening here. On one side, this incredible market success, and on the other, these investigations that could really throw a wrench in the works.
Okay, let's unpack these investigations, because they sound pretty serious. One focuses on Tesla's actually smart summon feature. The irony of that name is not lost on me, considering it seems to be causing more trouble than convenience. Can you remind us what this feature does and why it's raising red flags?
Sure. So this feature lets drivers use their phone app to remotely summon their Tesla from a parking spot. So the idea is it can navigate through parking lots and come to you, theoretically making life easier.
Right.
However, the problem is there have been reports of crashes and near misses linked to this feature, enough that the NHTSA has decided to take a closer look.
And this isn't the first time Tesla's been under scrutiny from the NHTSA, right? Historically, how have these investigations played out? Do they usually lead to recalls, fines, or are they typically resolved through software updates?
You know, it's a mixed bag, really. Sometimes Tesla has addressed some NHTSA concerns with software updates. However, some investigations have resulted in recalls. What's interesting is that so far these investigations haven't seemed to significantly impact Tesla's stock price. Whether that holds true this time? Well, it's too early to tell.
Especially with this other investigation looming in the background, the one involving the Cybertruck explosion in Las Vegas. This goes beyond a simple product malfunction. There's a potential terrorism angle that makes this whole situation even more unsettling.
Absolutely. It's a disturbing incident. The suspect, a former Green Beret, allegedly used AI tools like ChatGPT to plan the attack. He was researching explosives, ammunition, and even potential targets. Law enforcement is treating this as a possible act of domestic terrorism.
So this brings up some pretty big questions about the accessibility and potential misuse of AI technology. But I'm also wondering how this incident combined with the Smart Summit investigation will impact Tesla's stock price in the long run.
Well, as of Tuesday, Tesla's stock was down 4.1%, and that decline continued Wednesday morning. It's hard to say for certain what role these incidents played, but they certainly didn't help.
So what are the analysts saying? What are the main factors driving that downward trend?
Well, it seems to be a confluence of things. You've got the NHTSA investigations, of course. Then there's a recent downgrade from Bank of America Securities. And then you have this rather unexpected perspective from the Hyundai CEO, Jose Munoz, who suggested that Elon Musk's close ties to President-elect Trump could actually be beneficial for Tesla's competitors.
Really?
It raised a few eyebrows, for sure.
Can you elaborate on that? How could those political ties potentially benefit Hyundai and others in the EV space rather than Tesla itself?
Well, Munoz believes that Musk's influence might secure favorable policies for the entire EV industry, not just Tesla. So think things like increased investment in charging infrastructure, tax breaks for EV buyers, maybe even streamlining regulations, essentially a rising tide that lifts all electric boats, so to speak.
So a rising tide, but with the potential for some choppy waters along the way. After all, there's concern that Musk might use his position to push for changes that benefit Tesla while potentially hurting rival.
Exactly. Some speculate that he could lobby for a reduction in the $7,500 federal electric car subsidy, claiming it primarily benefits wealthier buyers and that Tesla doesn't need it to stay competitive. Of course, his competitors see this differently.
It's a complex dance between government policy, industry competition, and personal relationships. It makes you wonder about the role of government subsidies in the EV market overall. Are they truly helping to accelerate adoption, or are they creating an unfair playing field?
That's a debate that's been raging for years, and it's a tough one to unpack in a few minutes. On the one hand, subsidies can incentivize consumers to choose electric vehicles, which helps move us toward a more sustainable future. But they can also distort the market, potentially favoring some companies over others, and maybe even delaying the development of more affordable EVs in the long run.
It seems like a delicate balancing act, and it will be interesting to see how this plays out with the new administration taking the reins. But let's move away from the political arena for a moment and focus on a positive development for Tesla amidst all this drama, their success in the UK. You mentioned the Model Y's impressive sales figures, but can you put that into perspective for us? What does this tell us about Tesla's overall market penetration and their position in the global auto industry?
Well, the UK is a significant market for the auto industry, and the fact that the Model Y, which isn't even a fully electric car yet, has broken into the top 5 is a major accomplishment for Tesla. It demonstrates their ability to compete head-to-head with established brands in a mature market. It also shows the growing demand for electric vehicles, even in regions with strong ties to traditional car manufacturers.
It makes you wonder, with this kind of momentum, could those NHTSA investigations really put a dent in Tesla's growth?
It's hard to say for sure, but there's another aspect of Tesla's success that's worth exploring, one that's perhaps even more surprising than their sales figures.
Oh, this sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
Well, it turns out that other car companies are actually paying Tesla to pool their CO2 emissions.
Hold on, how does that even work? Are we talking about some kind of environmental shell game here?
It's actually not that complicated. It's all about carbon credits. You see, the European Union has these incredibly strict emissions regulations that are about to take full effect in 2025. Companies that don't meet these targets are going to face some hefty fines.
So instead of investing in their own electric vehicle programs and cleaning up their acts, some companies are taking the easy way out and just buying their way to compliance.
Essentially, yes.
Yep.
And Tesla, being a fully electric vehicle manufacturer, has a surplus of carbon credits that they can sell to these companies. It's actually become a significant revenue stream for them.
Wow, that's quite a twist. So
Yeah.
Tesla's not just a car company, they're an environmental solution provider for traditional automakers.
It's certainly a fascinating dynamic, and it raises all sorts of questions about the effectiveness of these carbon credit schemes and whether they're truly incentivizing meaningful change. But that's a conversation for another deep dive. For now, let's shift gears and take a closer look at one of Tesla's core technologies, their full self-driving system, or FSD.
Yeah, let's peek under the hood and see what's making this technology tick. We've got access to a patent that details how Tesla is optimizing FSD, and I'm ready to get a bit more technical.
Okay, let's dive into the world of algorithms and neural networks. Don't worry, I'll try to keep it accessible. So this patent focuses on how Tesla is making FSD as efficient and responsive as possible, which is crucial for safe autonomous driving. It all starts with the concept of subnetworks. Think of FSD not as one massive program, but rather as a collection of specialized departments, each with its own unique role.
So instead of having one giant brain trying to do everything at once, you've got smaller, more focused teams, each tackling a specific task.
Precisely. And just like a well-run company, these subnetworks communicate and collaborate to achieve the overall goal, safe and efficient autonomous driving.
Okay, I'm following so far. But what exactly are these subnetworks doing? What kind of tasks are they responsible for?
Well, think about all the things you do as a driver. You have to recognize traffic signals, track other cars and pedestrians, stay in your lane, navigate roads, maybe even plan routes and avoid obstacles. Each of these tasks is handled by a dedicated subnetwork within FSD.
It's amazing to think about the sheer complexity of autonomous driving. But this approach, breaking it down into smaller, more manageable tasks, makes sense. It seems much more efficient than trying to have one monolithic system handle everything.
Exactly. And this is where Tesla's optimization techniques come into play. They've developed some ingenious methods to ensure that each subnetwork operates as efficiently as possible, using the right hardware for the job and minimizing processing power and energy consumption.
This sounds like the kind of stuff that makes software engineers giddy with excitement. But for us non-technical folks, can you give us a few concrete examples of how these optimizations translate into real-world benefits for FSD?
Sure, let's take object recognition as an example. One of the subnetworks within FSD is dedicated to identifying objects like cars, pedestrians, bicycles, and even road signs. To do this accurately and quickly, this subnetwork needs a lot of processing power. So Tesla uses something called a tailored compiler to translate the FSD code into instructions that are specifically optimized for the hardware responsible for image processing.
So it's like giving each worker the right tools for their specific job. Instead of using a generic screwdriver for everything, you've got specialized screwdrivers for different types of screws.
That's a great analogy. By tailoring the instructions for each hardware component, Tesla ensures that FSD can process visual data as quickly and efficiently as possible, leading to faster object recognition and ultimately safer driving decisions. And they take this strategic approach even further with something called strategic assignment.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What does strategic assignment entail?
It's a system that intelligently assigns each FSD subnetwork to the most suitable hardware component. So computationally demanding tasks like object recognition are handled by the most powerful processors, while simpler tasks are delegated to more efficient units. This ensures that the system's resources are being used in the most effective way possible.
Smart. It's like having your star player focus on scoring points while the rest of the team supports them in their roles.
Precisely. And to make sure everything runs smoothly, they've also got an execution scheduler that determines the most efficient sequence of operations for each subnetwork, kind of like an air traffic controller, directing the flow of data within the system.
I'm starting to see a pattern here. Tesla is all about optimizing every aspect of FSD, squeezing every ounce of performance out of the system. But what about redundancy? I mean, if we're talking about cars driving themselves, safety has to be the top priority. What happens if one of these subnetworks or hardware components fails?
That's a critical point, and Tesla has addressed it head-on. They've designed FSD with built-in redundancy and failover capabilities. This means that if one component fails, there's a backup ready to seamlessly take over, ensuring that the car can continue to operate safely.
So it's like having a co-pilot ready to grab the controls if the pilot becomes incapacitated.
Yeah.
Or maybe a backup generator that kicks in if the power goes out.
Exactly. And this redundancy is crucial not just for reacting to component failures, but also for handling unexpected events on the road, like a sudden tire blowout or a deer darting out in front of the car.
Those are the kinds of scenarios that keep me up at night when I think about autonomous driving. It sounds like Tesla has put a lot of thought into anticipating these edge cases and building in safeguards.
Absolutely. They've gone to great lengths to create a system that's robust, reliable, and as safe as possible. Of course, no system is perfect, and there will always be challenges to overcome.
True. But it's fascinating to see how much engineering effort goes into ensuring the safety of autonomous driving. But before we get too deep into the technical weeds, I think it's time for a change of pace. Let's end this segment with something a little more visual, a little more symbolic.
Sounds good to me. What do you have in mind?
Remember that Shell gas station in Spain we talked about earlier? The one they're transforming into a supercharger site?
The one in El Prat de Llobregat. Yes, right near Barcelona's airport.
That's the one. Well, it turns out this transformation is more than just a practical move. It's a powerful symbol of the changing energy landscape. Just imagine it, a dimly lit, slightly grimy gas station. A relic of the fossil fuel era is reborn as a sleek, futuristic charging hub, pulsating with clean energy. What do you think? Is this a sign of things to come?
It's certainly a striking image, and it does seem to represent a shift in our relationship with energy. But it's not just about replacing gas stations with charging stations. It's about a fundamental change in how we power our lives and our transportation systems.
Right, and this is where Tesla's vision extends beyond just building cars. They're aiming to create a whole ecosystem, a world powered by sustainable energy, where electric vehicles are just one piece of the puzzle.
Exactly. They're investing in solar panels, battery storage systems, even robots to automate manufacturing processes. It's an incredibly ambitious undertaking, and only time will tell if they can pull it off.
Well, on that note of ambitious undertakings, I think it's time to take a quick break. But don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll delve deeper into Tesla's global ambitions, their challenges, and their vision for the future.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Tesla. Before the break, we were discussing that symbolic transformation of a Shell gas station in Spain into a Tesla supercharger site, and what it might represent for the future of energy.
It definitely got me thinking about how quickly the landscape is changing, not just in terms of infrastructure, but also in how companies like Tesla are positioning themselves.
It's a fascinating evolution to observe. Tesla's not just building cars, they're building an entire ecosystem around electric transportation and sustainable energy.
And a key part of that ecosystem is their full self-driving technology, or FSD, which we started to explore before the break. You mentioned some pretty impressive optimization techniques Tesla is using to make FSD as efficient and responsive as possible. But I have to admit, some of those technical details went a bit over my head. For those of us who aren't software engineers, can you explain why these optimizations are so important for the everyday driver? What difference do they actually make in the real world?
You're right, sometimes we get caught up in the technical jargon and forget to translate it into practical terms. So think of it this way. When you're driving, you're constantly making decisions, often in a split second. You see pedestrians stepping off the curb, You hit the brakes. You notice the traffic light turning yellow. You decide whether to stop or speed up. Now imagine a computer trying to do all that in real time while processing massive amounts of data from sensors and cameras.
Yeah, my brain is starting to hurt just thinking about it.
It's a lot to handle, and that's why optimization is so crucial for FSD. Every millisecond counts when you're talking about autonomous driving. The faster and more efficiently the system can process information, the quicker it can react to changing road conditions, make decisions, and ultimately keep everyone safe.
So these optimizations are essentially giving FSD those lightning-fast reflexes that experienced drivers develop over time.
Exactly. They allow the system to anticipate and react to situations with the same kind of instinct and precision as a human driver, if not better in some cases.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's talk about redundancy, because when you're relying on a computer to drive your car, you want to know that it's not going to crash if one little thing goes wrong. You mentioned that Tesla has built in multiple layers of redundancy into FSD. Can you elaborate on how those work and why they're so critical for safety?
Absolutely. Let's go back to that scenario of a computer driving your car. Imagine you're cruising down the highway and suddenly one of the sensors malfunctions. Without a backup system, FSD might not be able to see a car merging into your lane or a pedestrian crossing the road.
Yikes. That doesn't sound good.
Not at all. That's why Tesla has incorporated both hardware and software redundancy into FSD. So if one sensor fails, there are others that can take over. Similarly, if one part of the software encounters an error, there's a backup system ready to step in.
So it's like having a whole team of co-pilots, each with their own area of expertise ready to take the wheel if needed.
That's a great way to think about it. This redundancy is not just about responding to component failures, it's also about handling unexpected events on the road. Think about a sudden downpour that obscures the cameras or a construction zone with confusing lane markings.
Yeah, those are the kinds of situations that even experienced human drivers find challenging.
Exactly. And that's why Tesla's redundancy systems are designed to provide multiple layers of protection, ensuring that FSD can navigate those tricky situations as safely as possible.
It sounds like they've really thought of everything when it comes to safety. But with all this focus on optimization and redundancy, I'm curious, what are the limits of FSD? Is there anything it can't handle yet?
That's a great question, and it's one that researchers and engineers are constantly exploring. While FSD has made incredible progress, there are still situations that can trip it up. For example, heavy snow or fog that obscures the sensors can be problematic. Also, complex construction zones with constantly changing lane configurations can still pose a challenge.
So it's not quite ready to replace a human driver in all situations.
Not yet, but it's getting closer all the time.
Ah.
And it's important to remember that even the best human drivers make mistakes. The goal of FSD is not necessarily to be perfect, but to be safer than a human driver on average.
That makes sense. But all this talk about AI and autonomous driving is making my head spin a bit. Can we shift gears for a moment and talk about the human element of all this? How are people reacting to Tesla's innovations? Are they excited about the future of transportation, or are there concerns and resistance?
It's a mixed bag, really. You have a growing number of early adopters who are thrilled with their Teslas and the promise of FSD. They see it as the future, and they're eager to embrace it.
Yeah, I've seen those Tesla owner clubs and online forums where people are practically evangelical about the technology.
It's almost like a cult following in some ways. And that enthusiasm is contagious. It's helping to drive demand for electric vehicles and raise awareness about the possibilities of autonomous driving.
But I'm guessing not everyone is on board with this futuristic vision.
You're right. There are legitimate concerns and skepticism, and for good reason. Some people are worried about the safety of autonomous driving. They're not ready to trust their lives to a computer, especially given the high-profile accidents we've seen in the past.
Yeah, those incidents definitely cast a shadow over the industry and make people think twice before handing over the wheel.
They do. And then there are concerns about the environmental impact of electric vehicles, particularly the mining of rare earth minerals needed for the batteries.
Right. It's not all sunshine and roses when it comes to electric vehicles. There are trade-offs to consider.
Exactly. And we can't forget about the potential job losses as the automotive industry shifts away from traditional manufacturing and toward automation.
It's a complex web of social, economic, and environmental factors that we need to grapple with as we transition towards a more sustainable future. And it's not something that Tesla can solve on its own.
Absolutely. It requires a collaborative effort between governments, industry leaders, researchers, and everyday citizens. We need to have open and honest conversations about the benefits and risks of these new technologies and work together to create a future that's both sustainable and equitable.
Well said. It's a daunting task, but it's also an exciting challenge. And speaking of exciting challenges, let's bring the focus back to Tesla and their foray into the world of carbon credits.
Huh.
You mentioned earlier that other car companies are actually paying Tesla to help them meet their emissions targets. Can you walk us through how this works and what it means for Tesla's bottom line?
Sure. As we touched on before, the European Union has implemented these strict emissions regulations that will take full effect in 2025. Car manufacturers that exceed their allotted emissions targets will face significant fines.
Right, it's like a carbon tax for gas guzzlers.
Precisely. And this is where Tesla comes in. Because they only produce electric vehicles, they have a surplus of carbon credits that they can sell to companies struggling to meet their targets. It's become a lucrative side business for them.
So it's a win-win situation. Tesla makes money and other companies avoid fines. But does this actually help to reduce emissions? Or is it just a way for companies to buy their way out of doing the real work?
That's the million-dollar question, and there's no easy answer. There are valid arguments on both sides of the debate.
Okay, let's explore both sides then. What are the arguments for and against carbon credits as a tool for combating climate change?
Proponents of carbon credits argue that they create a financial incentive for companies to reduce their emissions. By putting a price on pollution, it encourages companies to invest in cleaner technologies and practices.
So it's a market-based solution to an environmental problem. Let the invisible hand of the market guide us towards a greener future.
Exactly. And in theory, it can help to drive innovation and accelerate the transition to a low-carbon economy.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about the criticisms? Why are some people skeptical of carbon credits?
Well, critics argue that carbon credits can actually create perverse incentives. Instead of making genuine efforts to reduce emissions, companies might be tempted to engage in what's known as greenwashing, making superficial changes to appear more environmentally friendly while continuing to pollute.
So they're essentially buying their way out of making real changes.
That's the concern. And there's also the risk that companies will simply shift their polluting activities to other countries with weaker regulations known as carbon leakage.
So instead of actually reducing global emissions, they're just moving the problem around.
Exactly. And that doesn't really solve the underlying issue of climate change.
It sounds like carbon credits are a bit of a double-edged sword. They have the potential to be a powerful tool for good, but they can also be misused and manipulated. So how do we ensure that they're used effectively to drive meaningful change?
That's a tough question. It requires robust regulations, transparent accounting practices, and a commitment from both governments and businesses to prioritize genuine emissions reductions over quick fixes and loopholes.
It sounds like we need a system that rewards real action, not just creative accounting.
Absolutely. And that's why the debate over carbon credits is so important. It forces us to confront the complexities of climate change and grapple with the difficult choices we need to make to transition to a more sustainable future.
Well said. It's a reminder that there are no easy answers when it comes to addressing climate change, but it's a conversation we need to keep having.
I agree. It's a global challenge that requires global solutions. And that brings us to another crucial aspect of Tesla's strategy, their ambitious plans for global expansion.
Yes, let's talk about Tesla's global ambitions. They're not just content with dominating the U.S. market, they want to take on the world.
They're aiming to become a truly global force in the auto industry. And they're not just talking about selling cars. They're building factories, establishing supercharger networks, and creating partnerships all over the world.
It sounds like they're building an empire, one electric car at a time. But what are some of the specific regions they're focusing on, and what challenges are they facing in these new markets?
Europe is a key battleground for Tesla right now. They've already made significant inroads there, as we discussed earlier, with the Model Y becoming a bestseller in the UK.
Right, that was a huge win for them, considering how entrenched the traditional car brands are in Europe.
Absolutely. And they're not slowing down. They're investing heavily in European production, expanding their supercharger network and building new factories like the one in Berlin. But they're facing stiff competition from European automakers who are finally starting to take electric vehicles seriously.
So it's a head-to-head battle for market share in one of the world's most competitive car markets.
Exactly. And it's not just about the cars themselves, it's about the entire ecosystem. Tesla's supercharger network gives them a significant advantage, but European automakers are working together to build out their own charging infrastructure.
It sounds like a classic David versus Goliath battle with Tesla playing the role of the disruptor once again.
In many ways, yes. But Tesla's no longer the scrappy underdog they once were. They're a global powerhouse with a loyal following and a proven track record of innovation. But they also face unique challenges in Europe, such as stricter labor regulations, cultural differences in driving habits, and the complexities of navigating a more fragmented market with varying regulations and consumer preferences.
Right. I imagine those narrow cobblestone streets and ancient roundabouts you find in some European cities aren't exactly ideal for self-driving cars.
That's a good point. Adapting FSD to the unique road conditions and driving cultures of different countries is definitely a challenge. But Tesla's up for it. They're constantly refining their technology and working with local authorities to ensure that their cars can operate safely and efficiently in diverse environments.
So they're not just exporting cars, they're exporting their entire approach to transportation.
Exactly. And this global expansion isn't just about increasing sales, it's about establishing Tesla as a global leader in sustainable transportation and energy solutions. They're setting up factories, research centers, and partnerships all over the world, from Asia to Australia to South America.
It sounds like they're building a truly global empire.
It's a bold vision and one that's fraught with challenges. But if anyone can pull it off, it's Tesla. They've proven time and again that they're not afraid to push the boundaries and challenge the status quo.
I'm definitely eager to see how this global expansion unfolds. But let's shift our focus to another crucial aspect of Tesla's strategy, their foray into the world of energy storage.
Yes, let's dive into that. Tesla is not just about electric vehicles. They're also a major player in the energy storage market. Their Powerwall and Megapack systems are changing the way we store and use energy, both at home and on a larger scale.
Okay, let's break that down for our listeners. What are these Powerwall and Megapack systems, and how do they fit into Tesla's overall vision?
The Powerwall is essentially a giant battery that you can install in your home. It can store energy generated from solar panels or the grid, allowing you to power your home during outages or reduce your reliance on traditional energy sources.
So it's like having your own personal power plant in your garage.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
It gives homeowners more control over their energy use and helps to create a more resilient and sustainable energy grid.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And what about the Megapack? Is that just a bigger version of the Powerwall?
The Megapack is a much larger system designed for utility-scale energy storage. It can store massive amounts of energy, enough to power entire neighborhoods or even small cities.
Wow, that's a whole other level. What are some of the applications for a system like that?
Megapacks are being used to stabilize the grid, integrate renewable energy sources like solar and wind power, and provide backup power during emergencies. They're essentially changing the way we think about energy infrastructure.
It sounds like Tesla is trying to revolutionize not just transportation, but the entire energy sector.
Exactly. They see a future where energy is clean, abundant, and accessible to everyone. And they're not just talking about it, they're building the technology to make it happen.
It's an incredibly ambitious vision and one that's full of challenges, but it's also incredibly inspiring. It shows that companies can be forces for positive change in the world.
I agree. And it's not just about the technology itself, it's about the impact it can have on people's lives and on the planet.
Well said. And on that note of positive impact, I think it's time to take a quick break. But don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll explore the implications of Tesla's innovations for the future of transportation, the global economy, and our planet. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been exploring this multifaceted world of Tesla, from their market dominance and regulatory hurdles to their forays into carbon credits and energy storage solutions. It's clear that Tesla isn't just aiming to be a car company. They have a much grander vision.
Yeah, their ambitions are truly global in scale. They want to revolutionize not just how we drive, but how we power our lives and our planet. It's an incredibly ambitious goal, and as you might imagine, it comes with its own set of challenges.
You mentioned earlier that Europe is a key battleground for Tesla. They've had some impressive wins there. But they're also facing some pretty stiff competition from those established European automakers who are finally starting to get serious about electric vehicles. Can you delve a little deeper into this competitive landscape? What are some of the specific advantages and disadvantages Tesla has in this market?
Sure. Well, one of Tesla's biggest advantages is their brand recognition and reputation for innovation. You know, they've really been a pioneer in the EV space, and that's given them a certain cachet, especially among early adopters and tech-savvy consumers. They also have a head start when it comes to building out that charging infrastructure. The Supercharger network is extensive and reliable, which is a huge selling point for EV buyers who are worried about range anxiety.
Range anxiety is definitely a barrier for people who are considering making the switch to electric. But what about the disadvantages? What are some of the hurdles Tesla faces in the European market?
Well, one challenge is that European consumers have different tastes and preferences than American consumers. They tend to prefer smaller, more fuel-efficient cars, which is not exactly Tesla's forte.
Right.
Tesla is known for their larger, more luxurious, performance-oriented vehicles, which might not appeal to all European buyers. They also have to contend with, those well-established European brands like Volkswagen, Mercedes-Benz, and BMW, which have decades of experience in building those high-quality cars that appeal to European tastes.
So it's not just about bringing their American-style EVs to Europe. They need to adapt to local preferences and compete on features and design as well.
Absolutely. They also have to navigate that more complex regulatory landscape in Europe with, the varying emissions standards, safety regulations, and incentives across different countries. And let's not forget about the cultural differences. European driving habits and road conditions are quite different from those in the United States, which can pose challenges for those autonomous driving technologies.
Right. I imagine navigating those narrow, winding roads in some European cities is a whole different ballgame compared to the wide-open highways in the U.S.
Exactly. Tesla is working hard to adapt their technology to those unique conditions, but it's definitely an ongoing process.
So Europe is a challenging but potentially rewarding market for Tesla.
Yeah.
But what about other regions? Where else are they focusing their global expansion efforts?
Well, China is another critical market for Tesla. It's the world's largest car market, and it's also a leader in electric vehicle adoption. Tesla's already made significant investments in China, including building their Gigafactory in Shanghai. But they face even more challenges in China than they do in Europe.
Really?
Why?
What are some of the specific hurdles they're facing in China?
Well, for one, they're competing with a wave of domestic Chinese EV makers who are quickly gaining market share. These companies have the advantage of local knowledge, government support, and often lower production costs. Tesla also has to navigate that complex regulatory environment in China, which can be unpredictable and challenging for foreign companies.
Right. China's known for its protectionist policies and its focus on developing its own domestic industries. So Tesla has to play by their rules if they want to succeed there.
Exactly. And there are also concerns about data security and privacy in China, which is a sensitive issue for a company like Tesla that collects a lot of data from their vehicles.
It sounds like China is a high-stakes game for Tesla.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
But the potential rewards are enormous. If Tesla can crack the Chinese market, it will solidify their position as a global leader in the EV industry.
So we've talked about Europe and China, but Tesla's ambitions extend far beyond those two markets. They're making inroads in Southeast Asia, Australia, and even South America. It seems like they're planting their flag in every corner of the globe.
They're definitely thinking big and acting boldly. They're not content with being a niche player. They want to transform the entire automotive industry and make electric vehicles the norm, not the exception.
It's an audacious goal, and it remains to be seen if they can achieve it. But it's certainly exciting to watch them try. And it raises some important questions about the future of transportation, not just for Tesla, but for the entire world. What do you think? Where is this all heading?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think it's safe to say that electric vehicles are here to stay. The technology is improving rapidly, costs are coming down, and consumer demand is growing. But the transition to a fully electric transportation system is going to be complex, and it will take time. It will require significant investments in infrastructure, changes in consumer behavior, and continued innovation in battery technology and charging solutions.
Wow. It's not just about swapping out gas-powered cars for electric ones. It's about rethinking our entire approach to transportation and how we move around the world.
Exactly. And that's where Tesla's vision is so compelling. They're not just building cars. They're building an ecosystem around sustainable transportation and renewable energy. They're investing in solar panels, battery storage systems, and even that autonomous driving technology. They're trying to create a future where transportation is not just electric, but also more efficient, more convenient, and more sustainable.
It's an inspiring vision and one that's full of challenges. But if Tesla can even come close to achieving their goals, it will have a profound impact, not just on the auto industry, but on the world as a whole.
I agree. And it's important to remember that Tesla is not the only player in this game. There are other companies, governments, and researchers all working towards a more sustainable future. The transition to electric transportation is a global effort, and it will take all of us working together to make it happen.
Well said. It's a reminder that the future is not something that just happens to us. It's something we create together. And companies like Tesla are showing us what's possible when we combine innovation, ambition, and a commitment to a better world.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. The future of transportation is in our hands, and while there will undoubtedly be challenges along the way, the possibilities are truly exciting.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Tesla. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking, and we encourage you to continue the conversation. What are your thoughts on Tesla's journey and their vision for the future? Share your insights and join the discussion online. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep imagining the possibilities.